Would you do me a favor? I have one slide. Okay, I think we're live. I see a box there. Welcome. My name is Scott Wiener. I'm a consultant working with the Department of Public Service on a number of REV issues, including demonstration projects. And for those of you not in the room, I'll just say that this topic is not as hot as we thought it was, or there are lots of people out in cyberland watching us in the broadcast. And we think it's the latter. So let's begin today's public information session. And on behalf of Chair Zibelman and the Commissioners of the Public Service Commission, I want to welcome you to this public information session about demonstration projects as part of the REV initiative, a topic that, needless to say, is very important and crucial to the implementation of the REV initiative. Before I begin today, I want to introduce my colleagues who will also be presenting today and who comprise members of an interagency team that we're very excited and proud about. Marco Padula and Tammy Mitchell serve as the DPS leads for the demonstration projects. Kate Burson, who is Chief of Staff at the Governor's Energy and Finance Office, and Micah Koch from NYSERDA, who you probably know is the Director of New York Prize and Strategic Advisor for Innovation, also comprise members of the interagency team, and you'll be hearing from all four of them during the course of this program. Before I review the agenda, I want to say a few words about the importance of demonstration projects. And as you'll hear during today's presentation, we think that these points can't be stressed enough, so you'll hear them many times. A primary objective, if not the primary objective, of demonstration projects is to provide an opportunity to test and explore and gain experience with new business models, both for utilities as well as third-party partners. And it is of critical importance. In fact, a demonstration project, by definition, involves third parties, not just operationally, but also as part of the financial exchange that will take place. And there's lots of ways for that to demonstrate itself. But the concept of new revenue models, new partnerships, and new business models is critical. And that point is underscored by a provision that I'm sure you've all noticed in the Track 1 order issued last month that provides an opportunity for utilities to earn a performance incentive based upon the demonstrated role in financial sharing of third parties in the demonstration projects. And that performance incentive is linked directly to third-party investments. These demonstration projects can be critical for us to inform decisions about the role and activities of the DSP and functionalities related to the DSP. It will help us understand customer responses, community engagement, certainly leading up to the proposal of a demonstration project, and is critically during the course of the execution of the demonstration project, is very important. A couple of the key points I want to make and underscore that the demonstration project initiative is not a one-time program that ends with filings on July 1st. In fact, the July 1st date is really just, it's a target. It's a beginning and not an end date. We expect the demonstration projects will continue for years to come as we test out and evolve new aspects of the REV initiative and the functionalities of the DSP, and most importantly, testing and exploring the development and the animation of the markets that we've been talking about. I also want to stress what may otherwise be obvious, and that is that this is a utility demonstration initiative. You're going to hear from members of the interagency team that I just introduced about how the team will be able to facilitate collaborations and we hope partnerships between utilities and third parties. But obviously the filing opportunities here are, and the obligation is that of the utilities. On the other hand, we want to do all we can to facilitate the introduction of third parties and utilities, as well as facilitating discussions among interested parties. And you'll hear much more about that during the course this afternoon. So now I'm going to cue Mike and ask him to put up the agenda. And let me quickly run down the agenda for today. The first item, next, number 2, will be the introduction of the interagency team, which I did. So we're going to go to the overview of demonstration projects and the initiatives. I apologize, I'm wrong.
We're going to go into a little more detail in the interagency
Yes.
in context.
Yes, back to the agenda.
Okay.
I just want to run quickly down the agenda, and I apologize because the agenda was edited in real time. So Kate is going to come up and give you a lot more detail about the interagency team, its roots, and most important, its goals and objectives. Tammy will then talk about, in great detail, the overview of demonstration projects objectives and what we're going to be looking for. Micah will then talk about pre-proposal assistance, the kind of assistance that will be available to third parties and utilities leading up to the filing of a specific demonstration project. And then Marco will come up and talk about the evaluation criteria and the selection and approval process of specific demonstration projects. Then Tammy will return with the procedure for filing and for ongoing reporting. We're going to take questions during the course of the program today at the end of each one of these sessions. And for those of you that are online that would like to submit questions, you can, there should be a screen now up, and you can submit your emails directly to revdemos@nycerta.newyork.gov. We'll receive them here. We'll try and consolidate similar questions, and they'll be presented to the panel. And with that, I now get to introduce Kate Burson, who's going to talk about the interagency team.
Great, thank you, Scott. I'm not going to take too much of your time because everyone wants to get into the meat, which is really the details about the demonstrations. But I think it's really important to think about the demonstrations in the context of the larger picture. And so the demonstrations are with utilities and helping to inform the regulatory process and with third parties. But REV is an entire statewide initiative and an effort across all of state government and working with all of the third parties and utilities on the outside as well. And it's our, as the slide shows, our comprehensive strategy, and we are all working together, as is evidenced by the interagency team, to bring about the modern 21st century system that we now have the technology to achieve. So that's also the context for how we're working together to help facilitate the demonstrations is kind of a reflection of how we're dealing with this larger process in the state too. And each of our state entities has different authorities and jurisdictions and abilities and different skill sets within it. So we're really looking across the state and seeing how we can drive this really ambitious objective together. And I think as everyone listening probably knows at this point, it's really about more affordable, reliable, cleaner, dynamic electric system. And we're really moving in the 21st century from the traditional system that has gotten us, brought tremendous value over the last 100 years to one that can continue to bring us tremendous value with our new challenges that are here in front of us. So the next slide is good. Again, just quickly, our the kind of the pillars of REV. We have the regulatory reform. We have the evolution of how state interacts and helps and supports and enables the market. So the Clean Energy Fund is an example of that. The Green Bank is an example, really working closely, public and private, and looking at what does the market need to truly grow and be self-sustaining. And also, how can all of our government entities lead by example is another pillar of REV. And so now, I kind of, as one of the things that we're also seeing kind of throughout in a lot of different industries is the evolution of technology and how people are now, whether it's specifically for direct energy needs in terms of solar, or even if it's things like gadgets such as LED lights, or you see healthcare moving from hospitals into the home, all of these things that are very dependent upon a resilient energy system and really choices. So having the end user move from an end user to a customer that sees that they have options out there, and for one reason or another wants to engage and doesn't feel kind of like they have to have everything maybe imposed on them. So that's the environment in which we're all working today. And again, kind of how we move from this centralized power system to the clean local power kind of network system that we now have the capability to do is what we're as a state working towards. And the demonstrations are one of the highest priorities right now in this effort. It's one piece of, again, this much larger effort. It's one piece of the regulatory reform, one piece of kind of stimulating the markets. And, so that's why we're going to dig into the details. But I just want to give, just before we dive into the specifics on this process, just very high level points. The one big focus is that these demonstrations should really be testing business models instead of technology. Technology needs to continue to be tested in R&D, but there's a different channel for that. So this is really about mature technology and new ways to unbundle services and get different products and services to the customer. And another kind of, I think, new way of looking at things is to think about energy services as a whole instead of specific technology. So these end products could be a combination of a variety of different technologies together. So it kind of requires cooperation and partnerships that might be unique. So those are two just high-level points before now I want to hand it over to Tammy. Oh, and I guess the last point, which is critical, is also the fact about communities and customers. These are critical partners, and engaging in ways that I don't think historically we have as an industry engaged. And so this is another growing point of these demonstrations. So now I want to hand it over to Tammy. She's going to walk you through the objectives.
Thanks, Kate. So I want to talk a little bit about the objectives of our utility demonstration projects. I'm going to hit on a little bit of what Scott talked about and what Kate mentioned as well. So why are we looking for demonstration projects? These demonstration projects we see as being critical to implementing the reforming the energy vision. They're going to help guide us with our regulatory policy changes that'll be necessary for REV. They're going to help inform decisions with respect to developing the distributed system platform functionalities, or the DSP as we're calling it. What's going to work, what's not going to work, what will be needed. The demo projects will measure customer response. Again, you're going to hear customer a lot in this. That's a key to REV. Response to programs, response to prices, and responses to this new market that we're developing. Customer participation is a foundational aspect of achieving REV. Demo projects will help us to determine the most effective way of implementing distributed energy resources, DERs as we call them. We want and we need distributed energy resources in order to achieve REV, but what's the best way to implement them? Where should they be located? What's the best way to get the value to the system and ultimately get value to the customers? So the primary objectives of the demonstration projects will be, first and foremost, and you're going to continue to hear this when we talk about demonstration projects, is to demonstrate new business models and new revenue stream opportunities, and to distribute the value that's generated by these new solutions between utilities, third parties, and the customers. So the traditional utility business model would be that the utility makes the investments go into the utility's rate base, and the utility customers end up paying for those investments. What we envision here is a new business model where there are partners. You'll hear that a lot too. We want partners. And by partners, in this context, we expect partners not only to just be the vendors of the utilities and not just to be the collaborators with the utilities, but to also to provide some sort of capital or revenues in other ways, such as fee-based arrangements with the utilities. In other words, we want the partners to have a skin in the game. So to that end, it's going to be important that the demo projects include third-party market participants and also involve communities. You heard Kate talk about community involvement, customer involvement. It's really all about getting others involved. Another objective of demo projects will be to demonstrate new products and services that capture latent value on the grid to deliver win-wins. Kate mentioned that, we've demonstrated a lot of technologies. We know there are technologies that work, but really we're looking to put these technologies into new business models and to test them that way. So we want to drive innovation. We want to, we're not just interested in the technologies, but the business models around them. And to that end, we may need different tariff designs, or we need a market in order to test these new technologies. We're looking for demo projects that give the utility experience with managing distributed energy resources. Now again, we have distributed energy resources out on the system. We have photovoltaics, we have distributed generation, but in relatively small numbers these days, and essentially the utilities sort of just manage what's out there. They just manage their system around it. Well, we want the utilities to be able to design their system to incorporate these distributed energy resources. We want them to be able to manage them in large numbers. We want them to be able to plan their system around them, and we want them to be able to develop a market to engage these distributed energy resources. And finally, consistent with a major premise of REV, is the demonstration project should engage customers. And by this we mean all levels of customers. We want residential customers, including low and moderate income customers, commercial, institutional, industrial customers. So we want to engage all customers. So that's an overview of what the objectives are. And I think now I'm going to turn it over to, is it Marco?
Michael.
Micah.
Before you do, I just a couple things about questions for anybody that has tuned in recently to the webcast. If you're interested in submitting questions in real time, you can do so by emailing your questions to revdemos, REVDEMOS, at nycerta.ny.gov. And for anybody in the audience, again, we'll entertain questions at the end of each speaker. And if you have a question, we just ask that you use the podium to my left, and that way we'll have a mic and we'll be able to record your question and the corresponding answer. And with that, let me introduce Micah.
All right, thanks, Scott. So I'm going to speak a little bit about pre-proposal assistance, and so the way that we think that this interagency state team and the consultant will work with third parties and utilities, really recognizing that solutions are not predetermined and that this is really new ground for many of the parties involved. The notion is, I think, that we're kind of all in this together, and the utilities certainly are not expected to figure this out on their own. And I think that for too long, kind of there has been this sentiment that that businesses in this space have to figure out what government wants and kind of do it from afar. And so the notion going forward with the demonstration projects is that we're really kind of going to be workshopping and facilitating the advancement of these demonstration projects in concert with the state team and with the utilities and with third parties to get to some real near-term progress, but also recognizing that we need to kind of build a larger REV ecosystem, because I think, as Scott mentioned in the beginning, that this is the first of many, and that this is a process where there will be the need for multiple actors potentially on one given demonstration project. And so I think the key words here are to think about the state team helping to facilitate the process, helping with introductions where it's necessary, and using the submission form as a way for third parties ultimately to put their best plans and ideas out in front of the utilities across the state, because in many cases, individual vendors might have one relationship with one utility, or they don't necessarily know where to start with all 6 IOUs across the state. And so the submission form, I think we see as a resource, and one that really is going to offer some transparency in terms of allowing third parties a way in. And so we are going to be engaging a consultant to help us within this process. We think that this consultant will really be a resource to this interagency team, as well as to the utilities. Someone who is not just a process maven, but really can stand shoulder to shoulder with us in the advancement of these demonstration projects. Someone who can help us and really serve as a resource in thinking about some of the issues around financial modeling, particularly where new technologies are involved with locational nodal pricing. Can think about kind of moving from this traditional model where you have just one vendor to a model where you're thinking about shared services, and where the consultant can also provide a lens that looks at things from a business development perspective, some thinking about kind of how new models can combine to create value. And so clearly this entity, who's not yet been selected but should be in the very near future, will be someone who can add real value in terms of thinking about traditional regulations and tariffs, but also someone who has some experience in digital transformation, who has helped to launch new products on new technology platforms in other regulated industries, and can kind of bring a fresh set of eyes to this very, very challenging issue that we're tackling with the REV demonstration projects. And so we really see this consultant as being very outcome oriented, that it will be someone who can help kind of hit the ground running and move these demonstration projects up the curve, but also kind of can step back and take a longer term view on what we're really trying to do here, which is to build a more transactional ecosystem with third party solutions providers and utilities, ultimately in advancing the objectives that I think we've heard a little bit about, and that we'll hear more from with Marco and Tammy. So, Marco?
I'm going to interject
Yeah.
myself again.
Yeah.
Thank you, Micah. Before Marco gets up and talks about the kind of evaluation that will be taking place, I really want to underscore 2 points. The first is how excited we all are about the interagency team and really pulling together the resources across the government to help launch the demonstration concept. And I also want to draw the distinction very clearly between the pre-proposal, the pre-filing activity that takes place in collaboration with the interagency team, and the regulatory review that Marco will now go into. These are 2 very distinct processes. And we imagine and some utilities and some third parties have been able to take advantage and have requested the help of the interagency team to date, and they've been very interesting. They've been very iterative. I think we've all learned a lot from, to use a phrase that Kate has used, to workshop an idea and see how do you take a concept that we knew the pathway in a traditional utility paradigm, but how do we tackle a problem in the context of REV? And it's been interesting conversations, and it's been, I think, fruitful conversations. We're hoping that will lead to the filing of a specific proposal. The mere fact that a project has been consulted with the interagency team doesn't mean anything other than they've consulted with the interagency team. It's not a form of pre-approval. It's not a prediction of outcome. All that is a process that was described in some detail in the Track 1 order back in February, and which Marco will now describe in even more detail.
Thank you, Scott. I'm Marco Padula. I work for the department, and I'm going to talk about the evaluation criteria for the demonstration proposals, once they get filed with with the department, the process that a dedicated staff team is going to be going through to kind of evaluate these proposals on a level playing field. We're going to develop a scoring system to aid in the evaluation of the proposals, but I want to walk through the specific criteria that we're going to be looking for in the proposals and the extent to which we'd like to see those addressed. They really build upon the principles that the Commission set forth in the resolution on demonstration projects. And you'll notice that as I go through them. And if you have any questions about them, we can have more discussion. So the first is third-party participation and partnerships. We've heard it before today. We're going to hear it again. We're really looking for third-party partners. We're going to look for the extent to which they're actually providing capital and to the extent to which the third party or partner is providing an innovative solution. We're not looking for the utility to define what it is that that third party is going to provide. We want the third parties to come forth with innovative proposals. The second is new utility business models. To what extent is the demo project going to demonstrate new business opportunities for the utility and for third parties? And to what extent will that demo project produce new revenues for the utility? There's the new revenue pitch again. We heard that several times already. Customer/community engagement, very high up on the list. We're looking for the demos to include outreach in the community, especially those communities that are directly affected by the project. To what extent do the demos include that active community engagement? Also, when we talk about customer engagement, we'd like to see the demos not just address one class of customers, but let's look for various classes of customers like residential, commercial, and industrial. Also, customer engagement, we'd like to see demos that actually attempt to motivate customers in getting them involved. So to what extent do you actually address motivation and motivating customers to participate? The fourth is identification of economic value. We'd like to see a clear delineation of the economic value to the customer, the utility, and the third-party provider. So we're looking for these demos to actually show what the utility can provide to the third party, what the third party can provide to the utility, and also what can the customer benefit. What benefits are there economically to customers through the demo? Pricing and rate design. We're looking for demos to address new pricing for demand response, new rates such as real-time pricing or time-of-use pricing, and to what extent do those third parties demonstrate how alternate rate designs combined with possibly technologies can be used to most benefit the customer. So we wouldn't expect the demo project just to put a rate design out there and wait to see who comes. We'd like to see a partner, possibly a technology partner, that could take advantage of that rate design and show more benefits for the customer. The transactive grid. To what extent does the demo include two-way communications, real-time operation of dynamic load, and other advanced distribution system components? Scalability, that's a big one. To what extent can a demo be scalable? We're looking for demos that can be scalable, and to what degree? Utility-wide, statewide. Market rules and standards. We'd like to see demos that could test rules that could be used in the creation of competitive markets in the future. To what extent does a demo develop and test rules for integrating DSP products and services into the wholesale market as well? We'd like to see demos that do that. And also, to what extent does the demo develop and test rules that can be used to ensure safety, reliability, and consumer protections? System benefits. To what extent does a demo create system benefits such as improved system efficiency, power quality, resiliency? And how are those benefits monetized through the demo? Does a demo demonstrate a monetization of those benefits? That would be great. Cost effectiveness. To what extent does a demo provide benefits to ratepayers, both quantitative and qualitative, as compared to the cost? And to what extent does the demo leverage third-party capital? That ties into the cost effectiveness as well. Time frame. To what extent does the demo produce measurable outcomes within a time frame that supports REV implementation goals? We're looking for short-term, I think, outcomes that we can actually see some results in the short term. Maybe some demos are longer term, but all within the time frame that supports our REV implementation goals. Those are all the major criteria that we will be evaluating the demo proposals against. Any questions on those so far? Anything come up? So staff's review will also include review of the utility's proposed deferral and cost recovery mechanism. We're going to ensure that it complies with the accounting and rate-making principles embodied in the Commission's current rate orders, and to ensure proper allocation and application of any proposed surcharge mechanism. Lastly, staff's review will include review of the utility's proposed incentive, if they so desire to submit one, to examine it from an additional revenue opportunity that the utilities would have through that incentive mechanism. But we want to ensure that it's tied to tangible reductions in the proportion of direct utility investment, and that it increases increases the proportion of third-party investment in the demonstration project. Really exactly what the Commission laid out in its order. And lastly, we're going to ensure that the proposals are funded within the 0.5% cap, unless the utility asks for some alternate arrangement. That concludes my presentation on the evaluation, and I'll take any questions if anybody has any at this point on this topic. Nope. Okay, thank you.
So Marco covered a lot of it, but I'll just talk a little bit more about the process for filing. And as Scott mentioned earlier, the responsibility for filing these REV demonstration projects is with the utilities at this point. So pursuant to the Commission's February 26th order, the utilities must file with the Secretary initial REV demonstration proposals on or before July 1st. As Scott also mentioned earlier, this is an initial filing. We expect that demonstration projects will continue to happen as we roll out REV, but we are looking for something from the utilities by July 1st. They will be filed under the REV docket, which is, for anyone who doesn't know by now, have it memorized, it's case 14-M-0101. As Marco talked about, as the proposals are submitted, a DPS staff team will review them for consistency with the demonstration project guidelines outlined in the December 12th memorandum and resolution and as adopted by the February order. It's expected that this review process will be rather expeditious. I mean, we're thinking weeks rather than months. Another thing Marco mentioned is we're really looking for these projects to get out there, to get rolled out, to get in place, and to get information back, because we want this to feed back into the REV process. We want it to feed into the DSIPs, the distributed system implementation plans that the utilities are going to be expected to file at some point. So we really want to get them rolled out and start getting some valuable information back. These are considered compliance filings with the Commission's order. Therefore, Commission action is not necessarily needed. unless the projects request some sort of special recovery mechanism or fall outside of the cap, as Marco mentioned. Other than that, we don't expect them to go back to the commission for approval. And we do expect that the utilities will be notified in writing as to whether the projects are approved to go forward. Anybody have any questions on that before I talk about reporting? Okay, just briefly on reporting requirements related to the REV demonstration projects. As part of staff's ongoing review of these projects, the utilities will be asked to submit status reports on the demonstration projects to track their progress. We have not put out what's going to be required yet, but there will be further guidance that's provided with respect to the timing and the contents of those reports. In general, we would expect that the reports would contain information such as the status of the project with respect to the expected milestones that were submitted with the project, capital and operating expenditures to date, whether the project is meeting the state objectives and outcomes as were outlined when it was filed. And then, as they come about, or at least by the final report, we would want to know what the experiences were, the lessons learned, any kind of possible modifications that might be needed in the future. These are demonstration projects, so, there could be lessons learned from failures. We're trying to test things out before we roll them out widely to see what works and what doesn't work or what can be improved upon. Any questions on that? All right.
Okay. Yeah. Press. There you go.
Before we move to Q&A, I just wanted, I don't know if we're moving there now. Just gonna.
Go right ahead.
Okay. There were just a couple things. I know we've put out a lot of information, and I just want people to know that it could seem like a very overwhelming list and huge challenges in terms of the evaluation criteria and what we're trying to do with this. And I think we're also aware that we're asking everyone involved to do something kind of a lot of unnatural acts here in working together. And so I want people should know that that is one of the many reasons why the state team exists, to have, especially for kind of looking at the pre-approval process time, to really have parties to talk through these issues with. And also we're trying to kind of be the best version of ourselves that we can be. And as Tammy said, the even when it goes through the approval process, this is going to be a matter of weeks and not months to move these demonstration projects and be able to learn from them. So I think this should be something that is very exciting to everyone outside of the utilities who have to do this, and hopefully it's exciting for them. But for third parties out there, this is a real this is a moment in time where you get to participate and be part of the development of a new market. And if you've ever thought, if only this tariff design was a little bit different, then these great products would work. And or if only I could unbundle this service from this rate structure, or there's this problem and I could solve it. This is that moment in time. So I hope that you engage with us and don't just see this big cliff, because that's how we're all going to succeed. So those are my big points.
Thank you. Let me see. Do we have any questions from anybody online? Do we have any questions from anybody in the audience? Please come up to the.
Process for identifying demonstration projects prior to July 1, in which case you will engage with the utility, consult with the interagency task force members. That seems pretty clear to me in general, but there are also rate cases that are ongoing, and there are demonstration projects being discussed within the rate case. And I'm wondering how that fits in, and whether those demonstrations are expected to fold into the July filing, or if in fact they may be approved prior to or within a rate case. Can I ask the second one?
No, why don't we answer that one first? And I'm going to ask Marco to answer, because he's living through that. I want to underscore a point again that July 1st is a target date by which we expect each utility to have filed demonstration projects. And in fact, some may file beforehand. We're hoping that some file beforehand. And we expect that demonstration projects will continue beyond July 1st. I'd like to suggest the important question you ask is, how are the proposals, the ideas that have emanated in a rate case, how will they be treated? Marco.
So I think the most important situation to address is those that are developed prior to July 1st. We could see ourselves acting on those proposals before July 1st. For example, give the Central Hudson rate case as an example, right? They have an ongoing REV demo collaborative that will result in a filing May 1st, if I have the dates right. Right. So there's no reason why the staff team couldn't review those proposals and act on those prior to July 1st, on sooner. And actually, we are very interested as a state. The state team is very interested in moving projects and seeing projects as fast as we can.
So they would go through the same review process and then
Yes.
be folded into the rate case if they're approved.
Definitely. Yep.
Dan, you had a second question.
I do. And I guess the assumption here is that third-party providers would be working with utilities to come up with concepts that they believe would be workable and be useful in this process. And then they would be submitted as part of the utility filing in July or thereafter, possibly before. But it would be, the utilities are the ones responsible for filing. I guess the question is, if for some reason you find that you don't have the same receptivity from the utility that you would like to see, is that something where you would engage with the task force members and talk that through?
Yes. The answer is yes, and I think we'd have to take a look at what the underlying facts are. But keep in mind that utilities have a finite budget with which to operate within. There are going to be selections based upon the rollout of their own REV implementation plans. So not every good idea is going to be able to be responded to as quickly as we like it to. We're hoping and anticipating that the intake process that Micah described will be a way to facilitate some collaborations that might not otherwise have been known about, and that a conversation that begins in the spring may in fact carry on well beyond the summer. But if there's a concern about that, that's something you should let the team know. Thank you.
Could I add on
Please.
to that also? And so, again, the demonstration projects are just the beginning, and even one of the principles is that, when whoever the company is that's working with the utility, that as part of that, you have to say, okay, in order to enable and create that competitive marketplace, this type of data should be available. And so all of this the demonstration is really just the beginning. And one piece of feedback that I've heard from some utilities even to date, where people are already starting to engage just because of the order that came out and have informal conversations, is that they'll hear from third parties that say, well, we want to be part of whatever demonstration you do. And from a utility, and what we would like to see is it's the idea of people, innovators on the outside. One reason we talk about markets and about competition is it brings in a whole new set of ideas and innovation. And so it's really come to the utilities with ideas and, try to work together as partners. And really, I don't know if we've said it yet, but we're very, the traditional system relies on kind of a vendor relationship, and this is really about both, intellectual partners, capital partners, business partners. That again, to stress the partnership. So, yes.
Thank you. We do have. This is very exciting. We do have one question, but it's been locked out on Micah's phone. Thank you. And from somewhere in cyberspace, we're asked a very important question. Can demonstration projects be related to any of the ongoing proceedings in the Public Service Commission? For example, community net metering? The answer is yes. There are many sources that are connected, and it's very conceivable that a community net metering program could be designed, a demonstration can be designed to test a concept that would inform the ultimate decision of the commission. It could also be that the commission's action is so close in time that the commission will be giving further guidance before the demonstration project could be designed, vetted, and then have the results. So everything will have to be taken on its facts, but merely because something might be the subject of the Track 2 process, some other proceeding that's now taking place before the commission, that should not be reason alone to forego developing an idea. Send it in, and we'll be able to help give guidance as to whether it's timely or not. Please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Pete Fuller with NRG Energy. And just want to reiterate, as we have in most of these forums, how excited we are about this whole concept. You know, we think where REV is going is where the electric business and electric industry needs to go, and our electric infrastructure needs to go over the long run. So we're very excited about it. A couple of questions here, just in I guess first one's to you, Marco. Procedurally, whether it's the July 1st or later down the road, the utility brings a proposal to the staff. If I'm understanding right, it is the staff and not the commission that's going to order or approve something. And does it have all the procedural trappings of a case, or is it just essentially an evaluation just by staff without public involvement? What exactly goes on there?
It's an evaluation just by staff.
Okay. And
If it falls within the parameters of the order.
Understood.
Right.
And,
Right.
and will there be opportunity for, say, partners and the utility to interact, or is it a one-time filing and then we wait for the answer to come back?
I would envision opportunities to react.
Great.
Yep.
Great. I think this is a takeoff on the question that was asked earlier, but to the extent that I have a brilliant idea and maybe doesn't fit any particular utility or what have you, is there anything precluding a third party from bringing an idea in that process? Or is that in the pre-proposal process and we talk about it to find a partner, or?
I think it's more. Yeah.
So you don't need to have a designated partner upon submitting a concept. It's not in the submission form that we have, it's not a mandatory box that you have to fill out. So I think that's part of the role of this interagency team. I just want to say, though, I think the notion of having an idea, I think we've seen some of that without some of the requisite questions or hypotheses that would inform the idea. In other words, one of the ways to think about this process is that a REV demonstration project is an outcome from some very specific hypothesis-driven questions and approaches around customer data, around new mechanisms for sharing value around energy efficiency, or for microgrids, or what have you, right? So really thinking through, essentially, before the idea comes into shape, thinking about the questions that idea will answer, and how whether the answer to that question is a pass or a fail, is something that I would encourage all communities and third parties to really think through before submitting your idea, right? Because ideas essentially they're great, and we want to see 1,000 flowers bloom, but at the end of the day, I think what we're after here are we're after some informed questions around the notion that was raised earlier of these very specific evaluation criteria that will help to inform the regulatory proceeding.
Thank you. And I think we're on the same wavelength from what you just said, but the last question I had was really, and I think this is also to something that Kate said, is a REV demonstration project necessarily that outcome, the hardware, the tangible thing, or could the demonstration in fact be change this little piece of a tariff, change this rule, which will enable the market to go ahead and do this stuff and animate the market and all of that stuff. I see a lot of nods, so that
Yeah, it could be, for sure. It could be. It could also be that the answer is yes. I keep thinking about the fact there could be changes to a tariff that are obvious in their own right and don't need a demonstration. But if there is, going back to Micah's point, if there is a demonstration to be crafted, specific thesis to be put forward, and then to try to see what happens, that's precisely what we want to do. And thinking about what is the business relationship, and business relationship, we certainly think can mean partnerships. It can also mean how is value shared, how are costs assessed and recognized. So it could be all those things.
great. Again, we're very excited about the whole process and about this demonstration phase, and very encouraged by some of the feedback we're getting from the utilities, and very much look forward to talking with you folks down the road. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here, please?
Hi, I'm John Flory with the Alliance Risk Group and also with the National Energy Marketers Association. And I just want to say that the NEM is committed to working with a number of its members to put together some a demo that incorporates ways of bringing demand response and stuff to the mass markets. And one of the question is how big a scope does something need to be chewable? And so, for example, if you just do something with the mass markets, the residential and small commercial, but don't do anything with large commercial, industrial, I mean, I'm assuming you just meant portfolio basis, not just something has to cover everything in itself of a project.
Correct.
And then at the other extreme is, we can do some stuff related to program, suggested rate design stuff, suggested business model stuff, but there's only so far that there's 11 criteria. Marco, I wrote down 11 criteria, and it's going to be tough for any one entity to meet all 11 of those criteria. And so, help us. Breadth. We have a breadth versus depth issue here, and if we try to do too much all at once, it'll just crumble on its own weight.
Right. And one thing I would note is not every demo has to meet every single criteria. And we wouldn't want demos to test the same thing at two different parts of the state. So in looking at the whole package of demos, we're going to be looking for these criteria across the board, but no single one has to satisfy all of them. Okay. And to get to your point, I think you were getting at, if you could demonstrate what your concept to one rate class and it's scalable to the other classes, that's perfect. You don't have to demonstrate it to all the classes, but you could demonstrate it smaller, and then the fact that it's scalable is what's important.
Or it could be, just building on that, it could be to a particular rate class in a bite-sized demonstration-sized piece that's then scalable up based upon its success. We're looking for things that obviously are going to contribute to market development and not a single one-off project. Now, single one-off projects may be important or can be important, but those aren't demonstration projects. Those would be initiated through more traditional paths. Also, in thinking about the 11 criteria, when proposals are done, we are going to be looking for, as Marco mentioned, more than a check the box, that this project meets this criteria by the nature of its description. We're going to look for some narrative that helps connect the dots for us so that we see how it does it. But if anybody wants to say, what are the things I should remember from today? New business models. And what does that look like in terms of the role of the DSP, the evolving role of the utility as a platform provider, and the opportunities for third parties who were previously vendors to the utility to become the utility's customer? Those are some of the core concepts.
I feel a comment coming from this end of the table, but
Well, I guess just bouncing off of some of your questions, I hope it's clear to everyone that this is also a very iterative process amongst all the parties. And so I think right now there's a kind of the idea form that's posted. And so even with, so this is just to help get in some basic things, and then the utilities might say, well, in order for this to be more helpful for us, can we add these pieces? And so we want from and when you see the form, you might be overwhelmed and think, well, I haven't figured all these things out yet, and that's completely fine. I mean, it's kind of just trying to say these are things that are important, and again, some pieces, some demonstrations will have some pieces rather than others. And then I also am kind of imagining the opportunity too for external marketplaces of ideas being able to develop and kind of help in a way, kind of helping others build off of others' ideas. I mean, that's kind of how how our system got to where it is today. So I think I just want everyone to take away that you should see this as a very open process and team, and give back feedback from everyone who's participating, and also things that you can do creatively to help the process grow and be more transparent even for each other, is also an opportunity.
thank you.
Anyone else in the audience? Yes, sir, please.
Hi, Chris Callaher from Direct Energy. Pete and I are vying to be our companies are vying to be the companies most excited about the demonstration project. I actually have taken credit for this internally. I took credit for the internet too. But in comments way back early on, we talked about demonstration projects as possibly having a lot of benefit for informing what the commission wants to do. So I think it's great to see this actually come to fruition. But have several questions. I'll tell you right now, the Central Hudson rate case has been the source of no end of confusion on the demonstration project front, which you're on your way to clearing up, though not completely. I think that there's an understanding right now, because that case is in settlement discussions, which we're a party to that case, but obviously they're confidential settlement discussions. Without revealing anything that's going on in those discussions, I think that it's fair to say that there's a common understanding among participants in the rate case that the demonstration projects were going to be part of a joint proposal that might be submitted for settlement. But that doesn't sound like it's at all consistent with what you're talking about. And in fact, it sounds like what you're really saying is that the demonstration projects at this point, regardless of their genesis, are on a separate track and are not, because obviously the JP would come before the commission for review and approval, people would object, et cetera, but it sounds like what you're saying is that demonstration projects are kind of insulated from that level, that kind of further commission review, and I assume that would be true of the Central Hudson projects as well. Do I have that right?
So the actual commission order with respect to demonstration projects states that utilities who have not proposed demonstration projects through a rate case must file by July 1st. So it gives them an out to the extent that there are proposals. The catch there is it really a demonstration project? So, and I'm not close on the Central Hudson case, but to the extent that those go forward as demonstration projects, then they are taken care of within that context. Other utilities would file outside of that. So it can, I think as Scott mentioned earlier, it can be either. It can be taken care of in a rate case. It could be outside of the rate case.
There's a question, I think, of, let's go with meeting the July 1st deadline. But I think it's also important, without getting to the substance of any particular rate case or any collaboration, of how much certainty, how much definition has been given to proposed demonstration projects, and whether or not an evaluation can be made as to whether or not it meets the criteria. And if it does, that could be part of an order. It could be that a demonstration project is proceeding faster than the resolution of a rate case. And that there'd be a desire by the parties to try to get that demonstration project launched sooner. There's a pathway to do that. So what's important is, and again, I'm talking entirely theoretically, one could conceive of a rate case proceeding where parties say, well, here are 3 things we think would make good demonstration projects. Dollars and details to come, but we'll continue to work on that. And that could have a different route than one that says, here's a specific rate case, here's the thesis we want to test, rather specific demonstration, here's the thesis we want to test, we agree so many dollars should be allocated to it, and that might have a different route towards getting done. Mark, I don't know if you want to add anything about the Central Hudson projects themselves, which I know are part of an ongoing discussion by the parties.
Yeah, I don't think we can talk about the details
Yeah.
of the project.
No, but the process.
But the process, from my understanding, the JP has already been filed, right? So the process to discuss the REV demo projects is separate and apart from the JP itself, and it will come be filed with the commission, and can be, as I said earlier, will be going through the same review process that we envision that I described earlier for filings that come later as well.
Okay.
From other utilities.
Okay, that makes sense. A second question kind of relates to just how open the process is going to be, especially where the interagency team is involved. To what extent are the various communications among staff, third parties, utilities, to what extent will those be considered, or can they be considered confidential or subject to the FOIL law? How are you looking for transparency? If so, how much? Just what's the expectation there?
What discussions are you talking about? Information you submit through the form that Micah described earlier, or are you talking about
Well, that
any
could certainly be
informal
one.
discussions? Or
So, let me give you a couple examples. Like we could go to a utility now, say, hey, we want to be partners. We'll execute mutual non-disclosure agreements, and we'll have our discussions, and then those would be governed by the non-disclosure agreement. Obviously, if we submit something to the PSC, we're not going to have a non-disclosure agreement. I assume that if there are any forms that, I mean, my understanding
Well, it depends.
generally.
It depends, right? In terms of established practice, if something is submitted to the PSC for the compliance review that we're talking about, there are standards that I'm sure you're familiar with in be able to redact materials for proprietary business confidentiality reasons, and that would still maintain like any other filing. So that would be there. On the form that Micah mentioned, I call it the intake form, that's going to ask very general information. It's not going to ask for proprietary or confidential business information. So I think there's an established practice before the commission, and that practice would be followed.
Right. Okay, but it's just that those confidential treatment or proprietary treatment doesn't typically come automatically. You have to ask.
Yeah, and the same would be here.
Okay. Okay.
So as part of a utility filing, we hope that there will be a business relation. Now, there may be levels of the business relationship that the utility and its partners feel are valuable to disclose for purpose of compliance review, but obviously would not be want disclosed because of their confidential and proprietary nature. So in making the filing, they would request that it be treated that way.
I guess I'm thinking more in terms of just something for you all maybe to think about. Stuff that
Please.
comes, things that come where there's not necessarily a third party working already with a utility.
Right.
Something that actually comes to the interagency team. It's just at some point, just something you may want to be aware of.
Yeah, no, that's fair. But
You know what I mean? I could certainly imagine at some point you're going to get a lot of FOIL requests.
Yeah, but I also think that if somebody's first coming to the interagency team, they're going to do so in a way that does not involve confidential proprietary information. If those discussions begin to raise confidential proprietary information, then there'll be an exploration of the right way to provide an appropriate protection.
Right. Okay. I'm sorry to take up so. You invite. Yeah. Sorry to ask so many questions. I know somebody asked about community. Well, actually, they asked about community net metering. There are several issues that have been sort of in the orbit of the REV. Not 100% clear that they're within the REV. Are they the shark? Are they the remora? Community choice aggregation, I know, is even the order talked about it as being kind of part of almost, at least with respect to sustainable Westchester, almost sort of considered a demonstration project in a way under the REV. There are just a couple of things I wanted to ask about specifically. Is community choice aggregation generally something that you're looking to get? I mean, would a demonstration project involving, let's say, some municipality other than Westchester, is that potentially a demonstration?
Well, I don't want to be facetious. Anything is potentially a demonstration project if it meets the criteria that we've discussed today.
Okay. So really the sky's the limit in terms of what the potential general.
Yeah, it's controlled by the criteria.
Okay. And the last thing, if you could just walk through the utility incentive discussion in the track one order, the 0.5%.
Sure. And before you answer, I'm going to ask Marco to go through it, but before he does, I want to respond to a relevant question that was raised. Online, it says, is the presentation going to be available? It's difficult to write down everything from the webinar. The answer is yes, it will. It is being recorded. It will be accessed on the PSC website, as other videos are. In addition, we're going to be preparing an FAQ sheet, which will be ongoing. So all the questions that are asked today, other questions that we've begun to develop on our own, and any questions that come in will be constantly updated on an FAQ sheet that you'll be able to find on the PSC website, the NYSERDA website. So with that, so people don't have to jot everything down, I'll ask Marco to just give a quick summary and overview of the incentive mechanism.
Well, was it the incentive mechanism you had a question about, or the 0.5%?
I guess
cap?
both. First, the 0.5%, I think, is the one I have the bigger question on. Like, how does it translate into a total dollar? I mean, obviously the total dollars are going to vary by utility, but roughly in terms of like total capital investment.
So I'll start with that one, okay? That the commission said that utilities can defer up to 0.5% of their annual revenue, of their annual T&D revenue. That amount related to the carrying charges on the demo project, as if the demo project was recovered over a 10-year period. And for example, I'll throw out, this is based on 2013 revenues, so if you use the most recent revenues, they may change slightly. But for Con Edison, the demonstration project costs would be in the $135 million range. In O&R, $8 million, Central Hudson, $6 million, Niagara Mohawk, $36 million, Rochester Gas and Electric, $10 million, NYSEG, $18 million. But the commission also recognized that if it was lower than $10 million, that would be the higher of. So those utilities that I mentioned, O&R, Central Hudson, O&R and Central Hudson, which were below $10 million, would jump up to the $10 million demo project.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and then the
Good.
incentive mechanism was that,
So,
is that sort of on
so
a
then the
case by
commission said that the incentive mechanism, if the utility proposes one funding for that mechanism should fall under the 0.5% cap as well. The commission said, we're not asking for the incentive to go above and beyond that cap.
So it's included within
It should,
okay.
if the utility proposes it, the funding should be under that cap,
Okay.
within the cap.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much.
Yep, hope that's helpful.
We have a few more questions have come in online, and I'm going to consolidate a couple. One is, what is the best way to connect with utilities? And I'm going to refer again to the online form that's now live, which can be accessed at www.nicerta.newyork.gov/REV demos. That line will be there. That address will also be on the PSC and NYSERDA websites. That is the best way, if you're not otherwise engaged with the utility, if you want to get your idea before utilities. Again, for those that may have tuned in a little bit late, submit your ideas on that form, and then it will be reviewed by the interagency team. And to the extent we can facilitate introductions with utilities, we will do so. And the next question related was, will submission forms be shared with others beyond utilities? I'm not sure who else it might be, so the answer is no. This is really just a facilitation around demonstration projects, so it would be the forms that appear relevant and have demonstration ideas would be shared. A very important question is, what if the pilot fails to succeed? What happens? And many of us have talked about the fact that there can be great learning in failure. And we don't necessarily anticipate that every project is going to succeed. And there will still be valuable learning from it. And that's why the analysis in the front end is going to be important on the articulation of and the Commission's understanding of what's the thesis that's being presented to be tested and to be proved. And the fact that we may find out that certain market assumptions and certain market designs were not successful doesn't mean that the project or the demonstration was a failure. In fact, to the contrary, the whole idea is to allow small, manageable, bite-sized experiments in REV implementation, and then if it succeeds, to scale it, and if it fails, to make sure that we learn from that and then move on to a design that may be more effective. Question, can projects be filed earlier and then be considered when filed? Can projects be filed earlier and then be considered when filed?
When they're filed, I think, can you file them earlier and have them considered then?
Yes. July 1st, again, July 1st is not a date that we expect all these to come in. We would love to see one tomorrow and are geared up and ready to begin processing it. July 1st is a date the Commission established to make sure that by that date, utilities had given serious consideration and had devoted enough time, energy, and effort to have a mature demonstration proposal or projects. We expect demonstration projects to come in continuing after July 1st for some time in the future. And lastly, can you provide more color regarding what type of engagement is expected from utilities to get communities to participate? Very important question. And again, I don't mean to sound coy or facetious. It really depends. We want something that's going to be meaningful and that's going to demonstrate meaningful community engagement. We know of some communities that are ready, willing, and eager to get involved as a partner and a collaborator. There are other communities who say if there's going to be a demonstration project that's going to impact our community in any way, we just want to know about it. We don't want to read about it in the newspaper. We want to be able to contribute maybe to its design. We want to be aware of how things may impact us as a community. Both of those outcomes and everything in between is something that not just the Commission, but the state as a whole is committed to seeing. And that's why the Commission took time in the order to write about the importance of community engagement. And it's really going to be very project specific to figure out what type of community engagement is best suited for the project being proposed and the community that are being impacted. Again, if there are no other questions now, there'll be opportunities to submit questions on a continuing basis online. Our FAQs should be up within a week, so you'll be able to track those. And we look forward to having an ongoing conversation and engagement with all of you in the room, everybody who watched in on the webinar, and look forward to great success with the demonstration project. Thank you for your interest.